Hey all, it's your girl Erin, and this is part two. So, in part one, I was talking about sexuality and gender, and in this video, I'm going to talk about how that is a problem for our society because of the language and culture we've built up around those sexual orientation identities based on gender. And so, yeah, but check out the first video if you haven't seen it, because I talk about how it's unscientific to claim that sex and gender are the same thing, that either is binary, and also it's inaccurate to say that someone is attracted to gender. Like, you can be attracted to someone before you know what their gender is, or you can be attracted to someone who's gender fluid and you don't know, but they've changed genders, but you're still attracted to them. And so basically the point is that you're attracted to people, you're attracted to a lot of things about a person, and their gender might make up part of that, but you aren't attracted to their gender. And so we look at the terms we use. So let's start off with heterosexual versus homosexual. So um, that when you conflate the two is talking about what body parts are going together, if you think about it. Because heterosexual, when sex and gender are the same thing in binary, means one set of genitals and the opposite set of genitals. Then homosexual means the same set of genitals in the conflated sense. Okay, but if you think of how gender actually, or you think about how gender and sex actually aren't the same thing, then what the hell does homosexual mean? Okay, so does it mean gender? Um, because it's we know for a fact that they're not the same thing. So does it you know or so then that's transphobic if you're going to say that heterosexual is the genitals, and it's transphobic to say that homosexual is the same genitals. If hetero is different and homo is the same genitals. Um, so then we've got to look. Okay, so yeah, so then we yeah so what does it mean to be homosexual? So does it mean gender? So then the problem is that if I've just described how you aren't primarily attracted to gender, and so while attraction based on gender probably does occur to some degree, it isn't orientation level attraction because as I've said before, um, you can be attracted to someone before you know what their gender is. So your orientation can't be, um, you know, it can't be that it, and it can't, and we got to understand this crisis that it's coming out of a place where the two are conflated, and we need to move to a place where they're not. And so, yeah, so now I'm going to talk about the term lesbian, or lesbianism. So I'm someone who I do, in some ways, identify as lesbian. Um, the ways being in my own head mostly, not publicly for safety reasons, basically. Um, but the points I want to make with this is they, lesbian from a cultural point of view, from an aesthetic point of view, um, has been woman loving woman has been a very big emphasis. Um, but non-binary people were included in the community, and people who were bi were also included. But recently, people have gotten very dogmatic about it, and they started to say that if you feel attraction to anyone accept women, then you are not able to identify as lesbian. And the problem with that is that it ends up being that nobody on earth could actually identify as lesbian. Because nobody on earth can know for sure, for 100% sure, that every single person they're attracted to is a woman. Because the person that you may have only sawn for half a second and got a very quick micro crush on, they might have been a different gender than what you may have thought or whatever, and so you weren't attracted to their gender. You may have been attracted to the way they appeared and stuff, but that we can't conflate these things, and so the idea that it's so what it ends up being when you try to build your community around that is men actually become almost like the center of your community, because you're going to have to spend considerable amounts of effort policing gender to make sure that you're not accidentally allowing anyone who is attracted to anyone except women, which is actually everyone. So it's like you're fighting against reality, and it's only people who've convinced themselves that gender, can be the basis for orientation. It's only people who've convinced themselves that it's possible to have primary attraction based on gender. It's only people who have convinced themselves that they can see someone, feel attracted to them, and still claim that they are primarily attracted to gender. Only when they're making all those mistakes does it make sense to gatekeep like that. And so now I'm going to give you some examples of people who might want to identify as lesbian, who aren't the cis-normative plus one, basically. So you take cis-normativity and add, one minor change to it, and suddenly, that's supposed to be the full extent of what you can be as a lesbian, which is weird, to be honest. But anyway, so you get people who are multiple genders at the same time, bigender, polygender. So those people, one of their genders may be woman, but another may not. And so if that person is being completely honest, then they wouldn't 100% be able to say they're exclusively woman-loving woman, which do I need to say is impossible anyway. So another example is someone might be gender fluid, and so think of it when we talk about words like lesbian. So I don't think I actually mentioned it, but you can't say that every single person who is a woman and loves other women is lesbian, and you can't say that everyone who's a woman and homosexual is lesbian. Lesbianism is a cultural thing. It's an identity that's based on a cultural celebration, expression of that homosexuality, and so people have a shortcut of saying that that's lesbian when they see homosexuality with women, but it actually might not be. I mean, they probably would identify as lesbian, but who knows? They might not, because it's not the same thing. And so, but that community, that might be something that someone is part of, and that aesthetic and that lifestyle and whatever, that's who they live. But maybe once a month they are gender fluid into a wolf, or maybe a couple hours a day they go agender, or maybe a couple days a week they flow into another gender completely, but it's a different gender each time. Who knows? But the one thing they always come back to, the one thing that they are the majority of the time, is perhaps woman. And so, they do might say to people that they're a woman. That might be part of their identity because it is their rock, it's their anchor, even though they experience a lot of different things. Now, you also get people who have multiple identities. And so, someone who has multiple identities, they are forced by sort of singular normativity, singular identity normativity, to present themselves as a single identity to the world. And so that often means to navigate the world in a safe way, to navigate the world without too much friction, etc. They have to also have a singular identity alongside their plural identities. And so that person, their singular identity, like let's say that they have 10 personalities and 8 of them, or 9 of them, or even 6 or 7 of them are women, they might choose to then have a singular overarching identity that is an umbrella for their whole personhood, even though it only takes manifestation in 6 out of 10 of the people in it. But they might want to identify as a woman. And so that is coming from the one side. So we have the impossibility of women loving women being the sexual orientation. And the beginning part of it is that there's so many people who might be in the culture, who might experience all the same things as others in the community or whatever, but have a non-woman part of their identity. But going to the other side, as already said, you can't be attracted to gender primarily. And so I find that this is often an area where people who are neurodivergent, and especially like autistic people, will get tons and tons of hate. It's an intersection when you're trans and autistic. You will get so much more hate than other people because if you're the kind of autistic person who is driven for calling things what they are, which is what a whole lot of autistic people go for. They don't like to rely on assumptions and things like that. They like to say things the way they are, to speak what they believe to be the truth as accurately as possible. And so they're more likely to not just go along with the norm. And so some women might be attracted to someone who ends up being trans later, and they only realize later, and they're like, would have been attracted to someone who wasn't a woman then. Or they might be attracted to someone on site. They don't know what their gender is. That person might not have been a woman. Or they might genuinely know that someone isn't a woman. They might know that they're a man and feel attraction to them, and still not feel that it was significant enough to be mentioned. They would still claim to only be attracted to women, even if they did on one or two or whatever occasions feel attraction to a man. They wouldn't say that they are someone who ever feels attraction to men, even though it happened like once or twice in their life. But in like an autistic person or someone who is very much interested in saying things accurately, etc., even if it only happened once, or even if it never happened, but they can just imagine the possibility of it happening. They can imagine being mistaken about a gender. They might admit that they don't fall into that category because they can admit that they weren't attracted to exclusively to one gender, because they admit that either that it's impossible for that to be the case, or that one time they thought of someone of a different gender, and felt attraction, that they don't feel like they should ignore that they shouldn't edit their experience. And so even though maybe 99.999999999% of their crushes and romantic and sexual engagements might follow the regular thing, they don't claim to only be attracted to that gender just because they know that it's not true. Um, and so sometimes someone is both of those, on both sides of those, even though that same person might relate to every single lesbian meme ever made. They that might they might have grown up like what like watching lesbians like exist in society or thinking about them or whatever. Like that might even be the thing that led them to realize that they're not straights, not cis, etc. Like lesbianism, the culture, the aesthetic, the even the identity might have been central and core to their own personal identity, but when they find out that sex and gender are different, when they find out that you can't be attracted to gender on sight because you don't know what someone's gender is on sight, that forces a specific group of people, and for others they might choose to do it, but for some people they can't help it, it's automatic. It forces them to reassess their model, reassess their understanding, and to come to the conclusion that they are not able to fit in to the label of gender loving gender. And I think that those are the people who need community most. Those are the people who need a sense of identity most, because their experience is so far from normativity, because they have so few people who they can relate to, that even the few people who they can relate to are able to reject them because of their rare or fringe occasion attractions to whatever. And even though beforehand there were people who were included in the lesbian community despite being openly bi, or even being even having husbands and saying that they have attraction and love for their husbands, were still included in the lesbian community. But but today, if you go online or whatever, this gatekeeping and this exclusion is rife. And if you don't believe me, I literally got kicked out of a group for it today, and that's what got me so upset that I made these extra videos. And so it is everywhere. And the thing that annoys me is that if you even like suggest that attraction based on gender isn't in line with the material conditions, material reality, if you even fart in that general direction, you can be victimized through this exclusion, because you get accused of being like homophobic and stuff, and because you're saying like that, there's some criticism that like the lesbian community needs to open up a bit, they need to stop gatekeeping. We can't say it's only women loving women. We can't say if you've ever felt attraction to men, or if you have ever dated men, or if you ever will once or twice ever in the future, that you can't identify as lesbian. But the amount of attacks and the way I get like cyberbullied and stuff when I express my feelings makes it that I can't identify as lesbian. Even though it's been a core to my identity my whole life, I can't, for safety reasons, because if I go out there and say I'm a lesbian, but then I also say, but I'm attracted to a few men here and there, then I get bullied, I get kicked out of groups, I get called all sorts of things, I get treated exactly the same way I get treated by TERFs, I get treated by a lot of lesbians. And so I'm waiting for the community to stop with the gatekeeping before I openly identify as that. But we are in a crisis, and we need to move to sexual orientations, identities, sexual identities, and perceptions of gender, understandings of sexuality, it needs to shift to stop treating sex and gender the same, and to stop treating gender as something that's based on looks or genitals or hormones or chromosomes or whatever. Your gender can be whatever you want it to be. And that is a literal fact thanks to science. And your brain is your most important sex organ, so you can literally be sex fluid if you think about it. And we need to not hear these things and be like, I've never heard of that before, it must be wrong. Or, XYZ famous gender author, or ABC famous philosopher author or whatever said gender is this, or YouTuber that, or Twitter person that said that. Like, no, think about it for yourself. Think about it and go look at the science. See what the science is saying. Experience it. Think about it for yourself. Next time you feel attraction to someone that you haven't met yet, think to yourself, well, I actually don't know what gender that person could be. And realize that we need to move beyond. And what does that mean? Well, my suggestion is we just make it a case of affinity, self-determination. Just if people want to identify as like a lesbian or as whatever, let them, even if it doesn't fit the mold. People understand the general concepts, and you don't need to be in control and stop that from expanding to include diverse expressions. And and you're still free to have your aesthetic and to have your affinities and jokes and whatever, because the people who wanting to identify as lesbian relate to all of those things too. They just have nuances about them that make the strict and simplistic gender-loving gender thing that isn't actually even possible in reality, because you can't be primarily attracted to gender, And so what does it mean? I suggest we make it a case of self-determination and make it predominantly, if you want to be more specific. Say, if you predominantly identify as a woman and you're predominantly attracted to other women, then that is the home for you. Be open like that. Why not? If you want exclusion, if you want to exclude, if you want it to only be people who are attracted to only women, then that is honestly going to be probably only people who are demisexual to start with, because you're going to have to be only people that can feel attraction, that won't feel attraction until they found out more about the person and found out what gender there is. And so if you want to have your own subset of demisexuality based on a specific gender, go for it. But I don't think that that's going to be mainstream enough to warrant that being our new definition for the big terms, because the big terms, I think the predominantly thing is what people already are feeling, and the nice and kind people on the internet are already promoting, and only the ones who I wish to never meet again are fighting it and gatekeeping and bullying me and kicking me out of groups and stuff. So yeah, and I do one day want to make more videos on gender. I want to make videos on gender that are easier to understand with pictures and all that. But for now, this is me ranting because I am someone who feels broken. I'm someone who feels incomplete because I really honestly did build a lot of my identity on being lesbian until I got kicked out of it by every single group of lesbians I came across from that, because I'm honest about the fact that I am not predominantly attracted to gender, that I have felt attraction to other genders before, and I'm someone with multiple identities, I'm someone with multiple genders, I'm someone who is demisexual, gender fluid, gender flux. One of my fluidities is to agender, and I also have fluctuating fluid sexualities as well. I have not, kind of also based on gender, yes, like there's lots of days where I'm only attracted to women, and then there's other days when I'm attracted to everyone. I call myself pan because in general I'm attracted to everyone, but I do go through days when I'm only attracted to women. But yeah, so but I think that that's it is still predominant for me because even though I'm almost always attracted to all genders, it's like I'm attracted to 99,990 women and then like 10 other people of varying genders or whatever. Like, because it's so predominant, it might not be that, you know, um, it's time locked. But my point is, we need to move forward, and um, I I feel broken and incomplete because I always run into this where I am someone who's always struggled to um, have a feel secure in my identity, and when I find anchor points, things that I can really build myself on, they always end up getting yanked away from me, and I'm not allowed to use them. I, I'm someone, I know it's not an excuse or whatever, and I'm not asking for it to change, but just as an example, where I live is in Africa, and so I'm not really exposed to African American vernacular English much. I do see it in the movies and stuff, but it isn't something that is a part of our life. We have our own colloquial terms and stuff here for that. The odd term does come over, but a lot of terms I've never heard of before. And so I always thought fam was short for family, and I didn't know it was AAV. And so that fam was the first word that I was ever able to feel like there was a sense of cohesion to my multiple identities, to my plurality. Fam was the word that gave me identity euphoria when I used it for myself because of the fact that it made me feel like I had a real family for the first time. And I can't call myself family because it's too many syllables and sounds weird, and I actually hate the way my real life family has treated me a lot of the time, and the word family is just not going on for me. But fam was something I felt I could unite around, and now I'm not able to actually find cohesion with my identity anymore because I was told that I'm not allowed to use the word fam, um, and that's been taken from me. Lesbian has been taken from me, and a lot of people will say you shouldn't let that happen. You should just keep using it, or just. But I can't because I'm someone who has a lot of empathy, and I'm someone who does want to not harm anyone else. And if people tell me what I'm doing is harming, and the thing is, even if my own opinion is that it's not harming, if other people tell me it is, who do I listen to? And also, I get bullied if I don't do what they say. Um, and I try to find safe spaces online, and when a safe space turns into a space you get bullied for literally just your own way of existing, um, then you get upset and make videos and stuff. So, yeah, anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.